Welcome once again to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the news, events, and issues surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. I am Stephen Conway. With me, as always, is Jeremy Finestone. We are contributors to the Fight Game Media Network. As always, plenty to talk about here. We don't have the volume of shows, but the show that we have to talk about, Autumn Attack, happened this previous Saturday. One of the best shows of the year. So many things to come out of it. We have a little clarity for the Tokyo Dome on January 4th. We have more for Historic Crossover. A wonderful show full of big news, and there's even more to talk about coming off of AEW. Jeremy, fun week to be a fan of New Japan. I mean, this whole weekend, it seemed like every day there was something very, very interesting to feast your eyes upon.
It was the Wild West in New Japan, man. Like, sometimes I want to wonder how you pack jam into a jar, because that's what this was. This was all jam-packed. And so I wanted to see how the sausage was made. It's amazing.
Well,
There's so much good stuff. I know that I'm breaking off on a tangent already, but man, my mind is racing, ready to talk about all this stuff. So why don't we get underway? Look first.
Absolutely. Well, let's go right. We're going to go to Autumn Attack in just a moment. But even before that, I mean, that was the big show of the week, right? We were all fired up about Autumn Attack. We had talked about it for weeks as we went through the Autumn Attack tour leading up to it. We thought that was what we were going to be leading with. Instead, we got a surprise the day after we did our last show. Of course, we do this on Tuesday. On Wednesday, Katsuyori Shibata shows up on freaking Dynamite and then signs a contract to wrestle Orange Cassidy for the Atlantic. I did not have that on my bingo card. An Atlantic title match. No bingo cards. So, yeah, anyway, I just blew past all of that. But Orange Cassidy was out there on Dynamite. He was taking an ass whooping like he does so many times. And then the Best Friends came out. Katsuyori Shibata came out, ran off the people that were tormenting poor Orange. And I guess that was what Pac and the gang and things. And then Shibata signs a contract in the ring for the open challenge for the All-Atlantic title. And Jeremy, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I said, is this really happening? Yes, it was going to happen on Rampage, which is done live. They didn't record it on Wednesday. They did it live on Friday. I was like, what on earth am I looking at? We find out later, Katsuyori Shibata has two dream matches. One is with Bryan Danielson, which makes all kinds of sense, right? And the other one is he really, really wanted to work Orange Cassidy. Like, what? So it seemed like one of the strangest matchups. And there it was on Friday, opening the show, Katsuyori Shibata, who had, of course, almost died in the ring, had a subdermal hematoma in his match with Kazuchika Okada for the IWGP title a few years ago. The only time we have seen him in the ring.
Power Struggle in 2017?
Yeah, like way long time ago.
Yeah,
I remember watching it. Yeah, and it was a scary moment, right? And since then, he almost died. He recovered, thankfully, of course, has been training guys in Los Angeles. He had an exhibition match with Zack Sabre Jr. on a show that was no striking, and it was just grappling. And it was a lot of fun to see, and everyone was like, oh, it's good to see that he's healthy. Then he has another one scheduled with Ren Narita at Wrestle Kingdom, which goes totally off the rails when Shibata went into business for himself against the wishes and the permission of the company and just made it a regular match with Ren Narita, his trainee, basically, his protege. That scared New Japan off of him. We haven't seen him in the ring in that situation since. But there he was. He's going to wrestle on Dynamite. New Japan probably won't let him in the ring. AEW will. And he goes in there and to open up Rampage, it's Katsuyori Shibata having a full-blown wrestling match challenging for a major title, or at least a minor title anyway, the All-Atlantic title. And Jeremy, dude has still got it. He had a terrific match. Of course, he's been working out constantly, but first match like this back since the Wrestle Kingdom thing with Narita, and I was thoroughly entertained by this, and he actually worked well with Cassidy, as strange as that style of clash seemed to be. What do you think of this?
You know, it was just one of those things that I'm watching this on Wednesday, and I'm watching it live. And I'm like, all right, I feel like Cassidy's going to win, but who's going to be this dream opponent? And then you hear the soft, slow, melodic guitar chime, and you're just like, huh?
No.
And then the name pops up, and you're like,
no.
What the actual fuck is happening
right now? Well, we know it's not going to be him. What's really going on?
Hell? And then he came down, and then he stalked into the ring, And then he looked him in the eye, and then he grabbed the contract, and then he signed it, and then we had a match. And like, I went directly to people that I know, and I'm just like, how is it happening that this dude who is not allowed to wrestle in New Japan can just up and wrestle in AEW and everybody's fine with this? Doesn't that just seem like a gross, like a gross impropriety with like medical clearance, or is it just being too cautious or whatever? I don't know. But it is so unbelievably baffling that we got to see this guy go and do his thing in Atlantic City with Mike Tyson. Tyson.
This was so out of whack. I didn't even get to the fact that Mike Tyson's on commentary on this.
And Mike Tyson is talking about Katsuyori Shibata having a great move set and just being an absolutely amazing wrestler, as if Mike Tyson knows exactly who Katsuyori Shibata is. And I felt like I was living in a twilight zone. Like, is this the same timeline that I was living in last week where Katsuyori Shibata wasn't wrestling anywhere, let alone AEW, and Mike Tyson wasn't commentating on an AEW show? What kind of bizarro world were we living in for one night where this all happened, and yet it wasn't even the headline of the weekend?
It wasn't.
Like, what is happening here? There's so much more to be coming from this. This feels like a tip of an iceberg where Shibata, I think he has more than 2 matches in him. And I think New Japan is going to be reconsidering their use of him. I think with Ren Narita on his ascent and Shibata being where he is, I think we're going to have more intersections with those guys. I just think as long as they're careful and he can prove that there haven't really been any long-lasting effects of an injury, the subdural hematoma that he suffered, and he's fully recovered, and only time will tell. Time is telling that this guy hasn't missed it. He's good.
No. Yeah, he looked, and of course he's been working out, and of course he's been wrestling with these guys. He's training them, so of course this isn't a man that's
he knows how to wrestle without putting himself in that position again, and I'm sure he doesn't want to. So it's not like he has a death wish. He knows how to do this, and he's so good that he can continue to do so, even when a high percentile of people, 90% or higher, would never be able to get back in the ring. This guy did. He can, and he's proven it, and it's amazing.
The subdermal hematoma happened on a really stupid and very avoidable spot from Shibata, by the way, which is when he absolutely headbutted the living hell out of the top of Okada's head for real in something that didn't have to happen, shouldn't have happened, and was a dumb shit move to do. And as long as he recognizes not to do dumb shit like that again, then I think he can probably still wrestle safer. This was an example of that. I mean, this match was good. Orange is a really talented guy, and I know that he isn't everybody's cup of tea because of his work. I enjoy his act. And I think that in this one especially, like the soft touch kicks, are presented as a psychological ploy and not as anybody making fun of wrestling. I think that's miscast when people say that he's making fun of wrestling as much as doing it. I feel like that's a bit of a misinterpretation of what he's trying to do. But Shibata was right in there. And when Shibata started doing some of that stuff too, where he just taps him in the head with the Kawada kicks, it was almost like a screw you kid kind of move. And the dude knows how to work a match still. And even a match with Orange Cassidy, which you wouldn't think would be a natural fit for Shibata. I enjoyed the match. I enjoyed the segment. Of course, Shibata took the loss. And Cassidy's going to keep that title for a while. But I was entertained by it. And if this does lead to Danielson, I'd be a little bit more concerned with that one, Jeremy, just because I think those guys are going to – I don't want to see a guy who's had a severe head injury, either one of them, kicking each other in the head like I think we would see in that one. The idea of Danielson holding both of Shibata's arms and stomping him on the head like he likes to do in his matches. I don't think I want to see that, but I think we're going to. And two outstanding work. I mean, the match is going to be good. There's just going to be some moments I'm going to be watching through my fingers a little bit.
It's going to be an exciting match. I think it's going to be a passionate match. I think it's going to be a well-worked match in which they're going to try and get that reaction out of you. But here's my dark horse prediction for that match. Okay. I bet it happens in Washington the same night as Wrestle Kingdom.
Oh, geez. You think they're going to do that?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Why not?
Well,
it doesn't seem like they got plans for Shibata at Wrestle Kingdom.
No, I would suspect they don't after last year's Wrestle Kingdom, where I think he gave everybody in the back a heart attack.
Potentially AEW talent wrestling on Wrestle Kingdom. Why wouldn't they want somebody back?
Maybe so. Maybe.
But
well,
that's my dark horse prediction. Shibata, Bryan Danielson, Pacific Northwest, January 4th.
We'll take a look and see. There you go. We'll take a look and see. But all that was Friday night. And then we got to get up early on Saturday and watch this incredible show from Osaka. And this was the Autumn Attack show. It was held at the big arena at the prefectural gym in Osaka, not at the Edion Arena. 4,006 people, though, a healthy crowd. And these people were excited about this show. I was too going into it. But this crowd was into it. They were demonstrative. It was not a cheering crowd. Again, applause and stomps, but there were some woos and ahs during the course of that show because this one was so good. But that crowd was ready for this one. It's about as close as you're going to get to a hot crowd that aren't allowed to cheer and boo. But they were into everything, and this is one of my favorite shows of the year. And I think we should just kind of run down these matches one by one and talk about them here.
Talk about it.
Each one was interesting. Started off on fire, too. It started with the junior heavyweight tag team title match. And this was the team, the United Empire, TJP and Francesco Akira against LIJ's duo of Bushi and Titan. Now, the challengers had been running the champions out of the gym. They have been beating them over and over again on the Autumn Attack Tour leading up to it. And they even had a smaller show in Osaka a couple of days before this one where they had singles matches and the challengers won both. All of that was screaming a retention. And indeed, TJP and Francesco Akira did hold on to the titles. Got no problem with that. That's a hell of a good tag team. But this was starting off the night with a real high energy match. Chris Charlton mentioned that it's been a tradition sometimes on these big shows to start off with the junior tag titles because it's usually an air show. It's usually high energy. It's usually exciting. This one certainly lived up to that. TJP and Akira managed to counter the Angel Immortal. That's the lung blower with the springboard off the top and the double stomp from Titan. Terrific finishing move that LIJ has built. They rallied with, I like this one, the double knees, where they just have the guy down in a kneeling position. Akira and TJP charge and do the running knees into them at the same time. They call it the knee, which is also Japanese for two. So it works. So double knees, knee. And then they hit the leaning tower, which, of course, Akira is Italian, so you call it the leaning tower. It is a cutter off of TJP's shoulders, and another good-looking move right here. Lots of fun. I think all these preview tags worked in its favor, Jeremy. This match was very smooth. It was very exciting. It had a lot of interesting counters to each other's moves because they'd had a chance to get into each other's rhythm with how they work these various double team moves. So I think all the previews bore fruit and made for a very exciting title match to lead things off.
I could not believe how hot and spicy this show started with this match. Like everybody just came out and they were on fire with each other, and it set the tone for the entire night. Like everyone was intent on putting out some amazing matches. This felt like the B+ show before the big show, like the pay-per-view before the pay-per-view. And so everyone was putting on their best because they knew that next one is going to be absolute showtime. So there felt like a vibe to the entire show where everyone knew the end game of where they were going and were more or less motivated to do so. And man, I really love this match. I really love Bushi and Titan. I think Francisco Akira and TJP have outdone themselves as champions of this division. I wasn't sure about them going in. I did always love Akira, but TJP is TJP. So that's how I feel about him. Although his look as like an evil elf as he was coming out with the emo band haircut and the whole vibe was like, yeah, no, you really want to be disliked and you are doing it well, my friend. I tip my cap to you. So hot opener. Check it out. There were there are people that don't typically watch New Japan that were commenting on some of the matches that were coming up like this. And I mentioned that I hope to see this one on Access in the next 6 weeks to recommend to people that it is something that they need to go out of the way to watch.
Titan is a big star in CMLL, and he's been with that promotion a long time. He's been very good for a long time, but he wrestled this entire tour in this match in particular like he had something to prove. And I know, of course, anytime he goes someplace, he's been to Fantasticomania before. He's been to Japan in the past. He was really working here like he wanted to impress, and he did. And he and Bushi have terrific chemistry together. So I'm this is one of these things where I know that Titan can't be on the New Japan roster full time. He's going to have to go back to Mexico and back and forth because I would CML wouldn't want to lose the guy fully. But anytime he wants to come back and work in this group, I'm happy to see him. This has really been a nice little boost for Bushi, who was just the one guy in LIJ that wasn't protected for a long time. Now he has a partner where you can just see these guys holding those titles someday. So
do you think Bushi? Do you think Bushi will end up going back to CMLL for some tags with Titan in the meantime?
Oh, maybe. I mean, the question is, of course, LIJ is. There's an Ingobernables faction in CMLL, but Titan is a babyface there, or a Technico as they call them, and then that Los Ingobernables in Mexico are Rudos, the heels. So is Titan going Rudo? Is there going to be some sort of LIJ versus Los Ingobernables originals, or they aren't even the originals because the originals have left CMLL because of politics, but. There's a lot of story to be told there, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as far as where Titan fits in, both in Mexico and Japan, with these different Ingobernables factions. I'm interested to see how it works out. I mean, but if Bushi and Naito has made appearances over there in Arena Mexico over the years, because he still has a fondness for it too. Hey, I mean, why not? I mean, I think it would be fun, and I know that we already know they're a good tag team. They can give a good match.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think that there's plenty of potential for like a back and forth relationship between the two, and it wouldn't take much, I think, to shift loyalties here and there as to Rudos and Technicos over there.
It could all be
just
done.
Depends on what master serves what, but you could exist in two different worlds and be a heel and face elsewhere. Hell, El Fantasmo can pull that off on a nightly basis, depending on a crowd sometimes. So why couldn't anybody else?
Up next, we had the United Empire against a whole gaggle of people here that were mostly on the Hantai and a little bit of chaos mixed in. So we had Mark Davis and Kyle Fletcher, Aussie Open, teaming with Aaron Henare and Gideon Gray. And they wrestled Hiroshi Tanahashi, Toru Yano, David Finlay, and Alex Zane. My first note on this is that good matches are contagious. And after that first opener there, these guys came out pretty motivated, and this was a pretty good match too. Aussie Open, terrific. We've sung their praises for weeks. We'll continue to do so because it's not really showing any signs of lightening up. They did the right thing in this one. Aussie Open got the pinfall on Yano with their move, the Coriolis. They're going into World Tag League. So are Tanahashi and Yano, but I think, again, Aussie Open, relatively new to Japanese audiences. I think they needed the win. They got a win here. And it's going to be interesting to see how they do in that tag league tournament. But this was mostly about getting them a nice win in front of a big crowd and another pretty good match.
Yeah, they're doing everything in their power to make Aussie Open just look so strong. Gideon Gray, man, he's growing on me. He's growing on me every time. And now they got the Reservoir Dogs look. And I don't know, they're putting something together kind of special, and they're kind of taking away the shine from the Bullet Club, it feels like.
Gray has been very entertaining in the Autumn Attack Tour, both as a wrestler doing mostly comedy spots and taking the fall and keeping the pinfalls away from the other members of UE. He has also just done a good job, on the microphone, introducing his guys. He's doing the Jim Cornette thing where he introduces his members of United Empire now, which is a nice little touch, sets them apart a little bit. And well, we're going to get to that one in a moment, but yeah, that's
sorry.
no, that's okay. No, we're just about there, but yeah, I mean, Gray has been working very hard on this tour, and I think it's paying off. And his faction has been looking good. And this night was a lot of this night was about United Empire. They were involved in a lot of very, very important things. So Gray has stepped up to the plate nicely there, and that brings us to that match that you just saw the little photograph of. This was more of an angle than a match.
Ironically, I was 28 seconds early on that graphic.
Exactly, because that's as long as this lasted. So, again, an angle, more of a match. We've talked about it more than we've wanted to over the last few weeks. Hikuleo was supposed to challenge for the never open weight title. You may have heard about it. Carl Anderson, of course, under contract, was in Saudi Arabia with WWE. And he couldn't make this one. So instead of stripping him of the title, because we feel like a deal has been worked out for Anderson to come back at some time, which is what I was saying all along, just because the way this is all playing out in public when it normally doesn't. It's there's a lot of working going on in under the guise of contract negotiations. So Hikuleo was challenged by Yujiro Takahashi. There's no way for that match to be great because Hikuleo is not totally experienced and Yujiro is not completely very good at all. So what do? This was perfect. This is exactly what they should have done with this if you're not going to get the title match. Here's what happened. Yujiro comes out with Peter, with Sho. He's got the whole, House of Torture thing. And, of course, they attack Hikuleo before the bell. They're trying to beat him down. Hikuleo, the guy that they want to look strong make the challenger look as strong as possible, he fights both guys off, throws Sho out of the ring. Yujiro is down. He yells at the referee, ring the bell. Referee obliges, rings the bell. He grabs Yujiro, power slam, choke slam, which is what you see right here in this graphic, and gets the win in only 28 seconds of actual bell-to-bell time. There was a little bit before that. If you're not going to have the title match, at least make the challenger look like a monster going into what will hopefully eventually be the title match. Jeremy, I am glad they did this rather than try to do a 10-minute back and forth with Hikuleo and Yujiro.
Yeah, Hikuleo needs to beat some ass, and he needs to beat some ass as quickly like this. If you book him like The Undertaker, which is what they did right here, he's going to get over. Give him a trench coat and a hat. Fuck it. I don't even care. Like, at this point, make him look as strong and dominant as powerful. Give him that aura because, it's like they have devalued the never open weight title with the strategy that they have. But if you have a guy this dominant chasing after it and making it clear that he's stopping at no point until he gets his hands on it, that's one way to rebuild the prestige, and I'm here for it.
Moving on from there, we went to the World Television Title Tournament. We had the semifinals on this show. Ren Narita took on Sonata in the first semifinal, and this was a terrific wrestling match. Ren is just doing so well since he came back from excursion doing this Katsuyori Shibata gimmick, and this was another fabulous match, and we kind of knew it was going to be pretty good going into this. And Sonata is one of those guys that Geto, the New Japan booker, can turn to when he needs a good match. And this was booked to set up this really nice semifinal. I tell you what's happened, Jeremy, too. I made this note as I was watching this match. Throughout this tournament, they have teased the idea of a match going the 15-minute time limit, in which case in the tournament, it would be determined by a coin flip. And this had me overthinking a little bit. Because as this went on, I thought, that might be a way to get Narita out of the tournament without beating him, is have this thing go to the 15-minute time limit and then work the coin toss so he loses it, right? I thought, well, maybe that's what they're going to do. Maybe that's how they're going to get Narita out of this thing if they don't want it. So as this came down to the wire, I had 3 different very possible finishes going through my head. It's like, well, maybe they are going to beat him. But I didn't think they would beat him. And I thought, well, maybe they'll go to the time limit and then have Sonata advance that way. Or maybe Ren's going to win. So I was really into this. I was enjoying it. And one, it was a terrific match. It also told the story, like Sonata got him in the Paradise Lock. Then kind of played to the crowd a little while. Did the drop kick and got him out, which for some reason gets you out of the Paradise Lock. It's not the most logical thing in the world, but we've been going with it for years. Why stop now? Ren Narita came out of that so pissed off that he took off after Sonata, and Sonata managed to do some counters there. So now they're planting a little bit of seeds where you can make Narita lose his temper and he'll make a mistake.
Yes.
I think that could bear fruit in a future match in a key moment there. This is another one that went almost to the time limit, 14 minutes and 31 seconds, but Ren Narita did hit that gorgeous overhead belly-to-belly into a bridge and got the pinfall win, sent Ren Narita into the Tokyo Dome, into the finals of the television title tournament.
Look at that
this was really well done. Yeah, it's fantastic. And
that takes
God knows I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, a good match and another enjoyable thing. And again, planting those little seeds that's that long-term thinking that we love about New Japan.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for Ren Narita's immediate future. And let's just keep talking about what his immediate future is going to entail.
Well, we'll go on to that because the next match would determine who his opponent would be at the Tokyo Dome. Zack Sabre Jr. against Evil. Long history between these two. Goes back, we've talked about it last week, that Evil ran into Zack Sabre when Evil was the babyface with LIJ and Sabre was the punk with Suzuki-gun, and Evil couldn't get the win over Zack. And then as the House of Torture storyline developed, they ran into each other several times, including at the G1 this year, where Zack Sabre outfoxed Evil and got a quick win. Well, they ran into each other here in this tournament. There's the bracket, and here's how this all planned out. So first of all, they've been doing these short, very short little promo packages before the matches where each guy that's in the match coming up talks about how he wants to win this match and be the TV champion. This was very funny because they had Fujita standing there, young lion, Kosuke Fujita, and you can hear, intentionally, Zack feeding him the lines in English to say, and he's basically phonetically saying that you're a wanker and you're a dickhead, all this kind of stuff, all those little phrases that Zack likes to use. So you got a young lion out there saying this stuff. Somewhere between that package running and Evil getting into the ring, he apparently found Fujita backstage and started beating on him. And so as Evil comes down to the ring, he's got a poor dazed Fujita with him, dragging the poor guy down the ring. Didn't even know what he was saying, probably. So they're beating the hell out of him. And then Zack, wait a minute, comes out. Only it doesn't quite look like Zack. But he doesn't look quite bad. He's wearing Zack Sabre's jacket.
Weird.
He's got Zack Sabre's hat on. So they go to investigate. And they give a very thorough investigation, considering it's clearly not Zack Sabre Jr., but it turns out to be Ryohei Oiwa, another young lion, dressed up as Zack. So, and then Zack sneaks up behind Evil and attacks that way. So that's how these two first touch in this match right here. So they run some misdirection plays with the young lions. And eventually Evil actually made a comeback. There's a spot in this, I know you know which one it is, Jeremy, that I absolutely loved. At one point, Evil put the chair around Zack Sabre's head, and he's going to do the baseball swing thing where he takes another chair, whacks the chair around the guy's neck, and does the home run pose, the whole thing.
Sure.
They go to do this thing, but Zack fights him off. And instead, with the chair still around his neck, he gets the best of Evil, stuffs him down in the timekeeper's chair, in Abe's chair. Then he grabs Dick Togo and smashes him into the rail and knocks Evil back over the timekeeper's table, which Evil has done to Abe 100 times, it seems like. And so Evil ends up taking the bump that he had been giving all these times where he knocks over the poor innocent ring announcer. And this time he's the one sitting in the ring announcer chair, and it's his guy, Dick Togo, being driven back into him. And so he took that.
All the while, Zack Sabre Jr. is wearing a chair like a necklace.
Still has the chair around his neck. Yeah.
Just dangling. Just dangling like a necklace. Sure, why not?
Crowd loved this. Deeply satisfying. They end up back in the ring. Zack is just about to beat Evil. Dick Togo, of course, House of Torture, goes to interrupt and interfere, but instead, he's got a young lion grabbing each of his ankles. The boys are on Zack's side right here. And after that, Zack did end up getting the win. It was only 4 minutes and 48 seconds, but it had a lot of fun stuff in there. I know I have spent a lot of time criticizing House of Torture for some of the ways they can drag down a show. This was not an example of that. This was a lot of fun. This was very satisfying. The crowd loved it. And most importantly, it's going to give us Zack Sabre Jr. versus Ren Narita at the Tokyo Dome.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that for that beautiful square video game title.
Yeah. You looking
Made
forward
on
to
an
this one?
8-bit system.
You looking forward to this one, Jeremy?
I am indeed. Zack Sabre Jr. has that cachet to lose and put Ren Narita over, which is exactly what I want to happen at this point. Zack Sabre Jr. doesn't need this title. Ren Narita, like, stratospheric rise right now. It's just tremendous. The last 2 months and the next 2 months are just, it's going to be the time of Narita. And we got Shooter Shota coming, and we just got so many people, and it's an exciting new next generation of New Japan that's happening right now.
And after that one, I couldn't agree more. I'm so fired up about that. And they've made this tournament, when they first released the bracket, I thought, well, there's some interesting names in this. Because, of course, they said this is going to be like a high-speed title, fast-paced matches, all available on social media. They're going to be in towns that don't normally get title matches. And then they had a bunch of very established older stars in this thing. But in the end, I think it's going to come down to the new young lion. And Zach, we know we're going to get a good match. But if they put this belt on Narita, could end up being something very, very entertaining as this thing goes on. So, and like you said, they seem to really understand they have something special with him, and they seem to be behind him. And when you get that little combination of someone who is as good as him, with the company realizing how good he is, and the crowd realizing how good he is, very special things can happen with a new character. And that's what we're starting to see.
Do you get the feeling that from watching this tournament that both the roster were really motivated to do something different with their matches, bought into the idea? Like, I felt like we got great work from everybody that was involved in this show, in this tournament, which you don't always get when you watch, like, even prelim, like, brackets on tournaments. Sometimes you don't get those strong and they kind of warm up. No, it really felt like, even maybe because the depth wasn't that much, but from start to end, this was a really great tournament to follow.
And they embraced what made these matches different, in that they took that 15-minute time limit idea and they worked with it. I mean, Kento worked it, that he was trying to run the clock down and delay to put pressure on Sonata. Other people wrestled like it was, oh my God, we've got to get this done immediately. It's only 15 minutes, because a lot of big matches in New Japan don't even really get going until the 10 or 15-minute mark, right? So it brought something different. Each of these matches, it did bring something different to the card, and which we said it from the very beginning of this thing. If you're going to introduce a new title, at least just do something different with it and not have it be just another thing that's not quite the world title on the show. I think they've done that. So I
100%
surpassed my expectations.
I am nothing but satisfied with what they presented in terms of this title and the potential going forward. Absolutely.
So up next, we had the incredible tag team match. Now, this was one where we had the 4 contenders for the junior heavyweight title, currently held by Taiji Ishimori. They were broken into 2 teams. Nobody likes each other, but they're going to be forced into a tag team match for this, as a little preview to the Tokyo Dome match. We ended up with Master Wato and El Desperado as a team against Ishimori and Hiromu Takahashi.
I totally called that. Called that.
I was just about to say, you nailed this one exactly. And this match shouldn't have worked the way it did, but boy, did they come up with some interesting stuff. So Wato and Desperado hate each other. So they tagged in each other with slaps to the face and chops to the chest. It was fantastic. They would go in. No, I don't want to tag in. No, I don't want to tag in. Smack across the face. Well, you're tagged in now, bastard.
They've escalated very quickly in short periods of time.
And Ishimori wouldn't tag in at all. Like, he just let Hiromu work the whole thing. And he's sitting there grinning, knowing that he's the champion, watching his 3 opponents destroy each other, until Hiromu tags him in by elbowing him in the forehead. And so then giving him a shotgun drop kick from the apron to the floor. So that went up. And they got so confused with each other. At one point, he gave Ishimori a Falcon Arrow and then covered him in the match. And then said, no, that's your partner.
I kind of felt like that was on purpose.
Oh, yeah, it was. I mean, the whole thing was just like, the referee was just like, this is your partner. What are you doing? And Hiromu was just like, oh, crap. Yes. All right. Yeah, pardon me. this really should have been a train wreck, but it wasn't at all. Like they even figured out ways for their characters to act fairly logically, in a goofy situation like this. A really good double submission spot that was fun. And anyway, in the end, Hiromu and Ishimori for a few seconds did a couple of double team moves together. But in the end, Ishimori, being the snake that he is, turned on poor Hiromu. Hiromu had Master Wato up on his shoulders. He ended up super kicking Hiromu in the face. That turned into a crucifix. And the one thing I said last week was that the only person that needs a little extra steam going into this title match is Wato. The other three are made, man. And he got the pinfall here, which is exactly what they should do. It was very, very smart booking here. So Wato goes into it with a little more steam. Wato was not carried in this match. He held his own absolutely with these three guys. He understands, we've said that too, how important this match is for his career to be seen on the same level with these four. And again, yet another encouraging sign on this, Jeremy. A lot of fun this match. And Wato got the push that he needed going into that dome show.
Yeah, so I'm going to be clear that 3 of the 4 people delivered exactly to the level that I expected them to, and Wato was the one that needed to match the aggressiveness, match the I can hang with these 3, and I got the 100% sense that dude can hang, and I feel like he's upped his game over the last 12 months. Because I think we're about year 3 with Wato, aren't we? From his excursion, he came in around 2020, so this is about the time where he's got a little bit of seasoning. He's no longer like Okada's kid brother vibe. He really has a presence about him that I take him seriously.
You mentioned I'm sorry. Pardon me. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm good.
I'm going to put you over anyway. It's a good. You'll be glad you did. But you mentioned his aggression and how important it was. That was missing from Wato at the beginning of his career. And I'm not trying to say that he wrestled like the Miz or anything like that, where there's never any aggression. But this had that little extra bit. You sense that he hated these 3, and you sense that he relished both his partner and his opponents. You sense that he relished the idea of hitting them and putting moves on them and hurting these guys and getting some business done here. And that was something that I did feel was missing from him for a while, just that aggression. It's been brought out here. It was the one piece that was missing. And after that, the guy's talented as hell, and he's agile. He's got good legs. He has hops. This guy can work. That was the only thing, was that fire. It just didn't seem like he wanted to. Could Master Wato get pissed and want to hurt somebody? Now I think he can. And if you go in there, I never would have said it.
I never would have said it until I seen it. But now that he has that extra aggression, I think that the way that he was wrestling as Wato prior to this, the word I would use is somewhat toothless. Like there just wasn't teeth to bite. And now I take him seriously on every level as a singles. And if I see him in a tag division, I'm going to look at him differently than I did before as a contender to win, potentially a junior tag league in the future or something like that. Like my perception of him has completely shifted, and it is due entirely to the performances that he is up to level with.
Yeah, and he does not have to win that title at Wrestle Kingdom, and I don't think he will. But if he has a match and he stays in those 4 like that, it's going to do nothing but help. And he's a pretty young man still. He's got a long career ahead of him, so this will help. Up next, you had Kazuchika Okada and Tama Tonga as a tag team against Jay White and Kenta. Now, this is kind of felt like a house show match on paper. This just seems like 2 guys that are, of course, a preview of the world title match. And Jay and Okada are great. Tama Tonga has been great. Kenta's a terrific wrestler, no question about it. 4 very talented guys. But there's the potential here for them to do this match in 2nd or 3rd gear because it is a preview match, right? Well, you don't want to be the one okay match on a great card. And they made sure they weren't. This was so good. They worked very hard. I'm ready to see this main event with Okada and Jay White. The stuff between the 2 of them was wonderful. They could have coasted, but they did not. In the end, it came down to Okada and Jay White fighting on the outside, Kenta and Tama Tonga inside. Kenta with those blistering overhead smacks, chops, I guess they're really smacks to the side of the head.
Heartthrob Kenta, baby. Heartthrob.
Tama Tonga turned it into a gun stun and pinned him. They made a big point throughout this match that two things, both of which work kind of against one another. Jay White is 4-1 in singles matches against Okada, mentioned over and over and over again. 4-1, 4-1, 4-1. That would kind of infer that Okada is going to try to make this one a little bit closer and get to 4-2 at the Tokyo Dome. They also mentioned more than once that only Brock Lesnar, Bob Sapp, I think there was one like a third, wasn't there? Was it Brock and Bob Sapp the only ones to go in as the champion to a Tokyo Dome show and leave as the champion? There may be one more in there that I'm missing, a foreigner, most importantly, a foreigner. Basically, the storyline being that foreigners very rarely go in with the title and leave with the title. So I know it was Brock Lesnar, Bob Sapp, and if the other one comes to me, I'll mention it. But they mention how rare that is. So we have two different rare things kind of crashing into each other here. Is Jay White going to overcome those odds and leave with the title, or is Okada going to tighten up his series, which sits at 4-1 in favor of Jay? I'm ready for it. It's going to be good.
I am super excited for this match. Of course, this match, they couldn't go at third gear. They're main eventing Wrestle Kingdom. This is one of the, they have had their instances where they're getting in the ring and they're slowly teasing what they're doing. But frankly, if it were me, I'd stop keeping them in the ring from this point on, like keep them away from each other, because I feel like we're starting to dilute that anticipation between the two because they're constantly facing off with each other in matches. We still have 2 months. We're good. You can ease that by dialing it back, but it wasn't the best match on the card, but it also over delivered on what it was supposed to be. But it definitely did not meet the level of many other matches on this card. So
no, but it was still pretty darn good, and they went 17-34, and you know it was just another good one. Yeah. And that brought us to the IWGP Tag Team title match. We finally get to see FTR in Japan defending the IWGP titles. And it was against the Great O'Khan and Jeff Cobb. Terrific match again from these two. I would expect nothing less, and we got a very good match. I loved that Cash Wheeler, first of all, sold like crazy. He was the Ricky Morton in this one. They beat Cash and beat Cash and beat Cash. The other thing they did, though, was they worked Jeff Cobb's leg, which ended up being very important later. They kept working on Jeff Cobb's knee, and when it came down to it, as the finish drew near, Cobb got Cash Wheeler up for, it was either Cash or Dax, but either one, for the Tour of the Islands. His partner then chop blocked him. And after having worked Cobb's leg over and over again, they managed to get out of the Tour of the Islands, which has so far been completely protected. I don't think anyone's kicked out of Tour of the Islands since he started doing it there in New Japan. And after that, they managed to get Cobb out of the ring. After a series of very beautiful teamwork-involved switches, they managed to get the big rig on the Great O'Khan and get the win.
That was such a great sequence to eliminate Cobb and hit the big rig out of nowhere. It honestly felt like an RKO out of nowhere, in which they were able to just like pull off that 10-second sequence of dispatching Cobb, turning O'Khan around to blind him from the tag, and then hitting the big rig. It was just great. The whole match.
Yeah, it was a terrific match.
I know FTR is one of your favorite teams to watch, and
I'm in the tank for him,
this is going strong in their catalog.
Yeah, it's a very, very good one. And then they had another, which I enjoyed also in the post-match comments. They had a confrontation with Aussie Open in the back, too. So a lot of things being set up for potentially down the road. So Dax and Cash, it was good to see them in a New Japan ring, and they hung right in there with them and had a great match and retained their championship going into World Tag League, which we will discuss very shortly.
So I've watched so much wrestling lately that I swear that I've seen FTR versus Aussie Open recently, but maybe I have and maybe I haven't. I could have dreamed it.
You didn't dream it. It was a Royal Quest, baby. Beautiful.
Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, it was an incredible match.
You think about how much wrestling that we watch, and you're like, you talk about like a tease for a match. You're like, didn't I just fucking see that match? Or are they teasing it for the first time? I honestly can't remember anymore.
No, they did it. But, again, you had a team that won their match earlier in the night a team that's going to be a big contender in that real world tag league, into the World Tag League. Real World Tag Team League is another one. And then they have a confrontation with the
title.
Yeah, confrontation backstage right there. That all is just leading to good things. So well done there.
Definitely wouldn't be as messy in the future if they were to face off, and there could be a different outcome.
You never know. Absolutely could. IWGP US Championship headline this show. And, Dave Meltzer on his podcast mentioned something that when the belt is in the right hands, sometimes a secondary title can be more important than the world title. I disagree with Dave a little bit. I still think the IWGP World Heavyweight title is the most important one. And, I still think that's going to be the biggie. The point he is making, though, is that Will Ospreay is on such a level and is, in fact, a bigger star than Jay White. That's true. Will is a main eventer for more companies in more places than Jay is. Jay's brilliant, but Will right now is on another level, might be the best wrestler in the world. And there is something very special to his U.S. title defenses now where they feel like a real main event match. He mentioned it, too, on his thing. It's not dissimilar at all from when Shinsuke Nakamura was the Intercontinental Champion, and you can make a case that the Intercontinental title match was as big a deal as the IWGP World title match. I think that Ospreay is on that level. And this match with Naito, of course, Naito is one of the biggest stars in the world and certainly one of the biggest in New Japan. This match delivered a half an hour wonderful match between two brilliant workers. And it had so many nice, real small bits into it and twists and turns. And then once they kicked in and headed toward that finish, the last 3 minutes of this was a thrill ride. This is so beautifully worked, Jeremy. What were you thinking as you watched this one?
So I'm watching this and I'm thinking, Billy Goat is a fucking star. He's so good. Will Ospreay calls himself Billy Goat in the middle of the ring. And so I'm so impressed with him wrestling the way that he does and connecting with the crowd, in which he's like, yeah, I know. Like there's something about his vibe and that he feeds off that energy. And I don't know how long you can keep this guy. I don't know how long you can keep this guy heel. I think they have an MJF problem with Will Ospreay.
They might sometime.
In all honesty. I think that they have a real MJF problem with this guy. There is an overwhelming urge to see this guy and cheer this guy. And no matter what dastardly thing he does, the audience loves him. New Japan loves him. Everybody, he's on such a tear and performing at such a level that you don't want to boo him. You are booing him out of courtesy because that is his role in the company. But he is on a stratospheric rate to be baby-faced, and the only comp that I can think of right now is what's going on with MJF and AEW.
It's an interesting point. I mean, what helped here as far as getting him booed was he's in with the most popular guy in the entire company is Naito, because people have such a soft spot for him. But Naito worked his neck, Will Ospreay's neck, in this match wonderfully early on to set things up for later. Will sold all of that neck work wonderfully. And it built to a moment where it looked like he was going to give Will the poison rana from the top rope, which would end everything with that neck. And instead, Will flipped, landed on his feet, which we've seen him do before on some of these, then jump right to the ropes and hit an os cutter. Fantastic. I mean, the precision of that was amazing. He kicked out of Destino. Naito kicked out of Hidden Blade. The Stormbreaker finally did it. It was a wonderful match, and it left a question in mind, which is, okay, now that this is done, what is Naito's path to the Tokyo Dome, and what's next for Will Ospreay? But a wonderful match between two brilliant workers, and he said, keeping this guy heel might be tough. We mentioned that he may have outgrown the U.S. title, but it's one of those things where maybe the U.S. title is growing along with Ospreay right now. So, I don't really, I would not have had a problem. I would not have had a problem with Naito winning this thing right here and sending him into the Tokyo Dome to defend it. But I also don't have any problem with Will going in, especially because we have a little hint about where they might be going with this, and it's pretty exciting as well. So,
I mean, the prestige of the U.S. title going up is a great thing, given the fact that the never openweight title is completely cratered, and there's no intercontinental title anymore. So, if you're going to make this title on the level that it is, and you want to, I remember at one point New Japan was talking like the U.S. title is at the same level as the IWGP, and everyone's like, yeah, no, it's not. But the prestige right now, I don't think it ever will be, but Will Ospreay is making an excellent case for that Nakamura Intercontinental title, Wrestle Kingdom debate that happened way, way back in the day, where the Intercontinental title feud was hotter than the main event feud for the IWGP title. So we might be having those kind of conversations coming up. I feel like Dave Meltzer definitely introduced that narrative out there, and it's hard to agree or disagree because it's a little too early to tell. But at the same time, oh boy, Will Ospreay is really doing some work being one of the wrestlers of the year this year.
Yeah, and it is an interesting point. It could be something that we end up discussing. I still feel like there is an aura about Jay White versus Kazuchika Okada for the World Heavyweight title. I mean, those two are also at an incredibly high level. And really, I think Jay White is one of the better big match performers in the entire business. So he's good all the time anyway. He's just a really great heel. But in big matches, like some of the stuff we've seen with Okada, with Kota Ibushi, we've seen some real special performances out of Jay on the biggest stages, which makes that world title match still a monster. But boy, what a nice problem to have, right? Debating which of your title matches is the biggest one. That's a nice problem to have.
I mean, Jay White is one of my favorite heels, maybe of all time. He is a pure heel that even his counters are heelish. Everything about him is heelish. And my only concern with that main event feud right now is it feels a little overexposed given all the times that they're interacting with each other and doing all these things. And we have, like I said earlier, there's 2 months before they face off. They can totally ice it for now. But right now, like they met at Rumble 44th. They met last night at Battle Autumn. I hope that there's a angle at some point that Jay White tries to take out Okada prior to the match and introduces that level of narrative to it. I don't know. But at some point, they need to stop having interaction so that I can look forward to when they finally get their hands on each other. So, and I think that's what makes the Will Ospreay stuff way more interesting because he's not having that kind of feuding. He's just having banger after banger after banger matches with these different people, setting it to completely different tone and narrative with his title defenses versus this one big title defense that's hanging ever since G1. So it has a lot to do with the presentation of the two titles, the excitement, the anticipation, the constant defenses. We're not seeing that with the big title, and that could be a big reason why that perception is there.
So after all that, we weren't even done. So he does his post-match promo, and Ospreay has won. Naito doesn't have a path to the Tokyo Dome, which he mentioned in post-match comments. We'll get to that in a minute. He kind of does, but you're not going to do that show without him, right? But moving on from that, what has Will got next? He issues an open challenge, and no one takes him up on it at first. And to the point that it looks like they're just going to leave, and they'll leave it up to us to figure out what's going on. The streamers come out, the music's playing, he's leaving. Well, then the lights go out.
I lost my patience a little bit. They waited a little too long for this one.
No, I kind of suspected. I was going to wait until Will got all the way into the back before I gave up on this because I felt like something was coming. Anyway, we saw a video playing on the screen. Guy riding a motorcycle, looking all cool. And then who is it? It is the roughneck Shota Umino, who has returned to New Japan finally from excursion. We could smell it. It was in the air. But Shota Umino comes out afterwards. He ends up taking out the whole United Empire, hitting the Death Rider on Will, and in a very intentional display of Moxley-ishness, He hits the Death Rider. Then he walks through doing the shoulder roll walk. He's out in the crowd like Moxley is. He still has the black leather jacket with Death Rider on the back of it. They will be facing each other at Historic Crossover. That is Will's next challenge now, and this can go one of two ways. Is this the jump start where Umino gets his revenge for Royal Quest when his father had to stop the match because Will was pounding on the back of his head? Or is this the setup for what could be Will Ospreay against Jon Moxley in the future? I kind of hope it's the second, although the first wouldn't upset me too much because I know that Umino is a heck of a talent. I think this is the start of something very big in New Japan with Shota Umino, and it was a nice debut. I enjoyed the hell out of this, and the people in Osaka were into him because when he went into that crowd and stood on those chairs and put his hands up, they were cheering even though they weren't supposed to be.
So Roughneck is a nickname. That's cool, I guess.
That's fine.
It's not my favorite, but there's something about Shota that comes off as more streamlined and slick that the Shooter and the Roughneck kind of nicknames don't work just right for me yet. Like they haven't quite clicked in the way that I want them to. And I'm not 100% sure that Shota's the guy to be belted with the United States Championship right away. So
I feel like it's more of I think this is more of a way to get to Moxley versus Ospreay.
It could be, but I'm not 100% enthusiastic about that match down the line.
Really?
I don't know why.
They've wrestled before and it was great.
It was great, but I felt like there was directions for Will Ospreay that wasn't Jon Moxley that I'm more interested in. But
look, you want Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega like the rest of the planet. But I mean, the Dynamite's on Wednesday. It's a tough one. It's a toughie.
But Moxley's there too, and right now he's the champion.
Well, but he probably won't be, will he? He probably won't.
Maybe not.
I'd put money on
we're looking at all these big plans. So when I think about Shota and Moxley and Ospreay, like it doesn't press the button of like overdrive excitement, but it's more like my eyebrows are raised. I'm like, interesting. Tell me more. So that's where I'm at on that. And I want to see where they go with Shota and Will, because I feel like that's the last big defense that he has going into it. And just the whole historic crossover there's going to be a lot of fun for you when you get to recover that show with spoiler alert, Scott Edwards in a couple of weeks. But there's just this thing of like, I feel like they're strongly hinting at it, but it's more of a tease than an outright like, yeah, we're heading in this direction. And there's so many things that are happening that I'm hesitant to commit myself to getting excited about Moxley versus Ospreay right away. It's a very complicated feeling.
I'm gonna do some supposing here. This is where I'm going with this. I also, because Moxley was supposed to take a vacation before all the crap went down with CM Punk and the Young Bucks and Omega and whatever, Larry the Dog, whatever the hell happened at the pay-per-view in Chicago. He was supposed to go on he was supposed to go on vacation. He loses to MJF. Puts over MJF. MJF finally earns his, because that's the whole thing, is that he's going to earn it for the first time in his life, right? That's the storyline they're telling there. He earns it for the first time in his life. That allows Moxley to take the vacation he was supposed to be getting. He comes back at the Tokyo Dome against Will, is just kind of how I figure this out. And because by then he doesn't have the title anymore. He doesn't have to be in the day-to-day storylines of AEW. And we're assuming that by then the executive vice presidents who magically were found not to be at fault by the company that they hired to investigate them. And they probably weren't. And they probably weren't. But I do always think it's funny. It's like, well, we hired this company to investigate our executive vice presidents, and the company that we
found no wrongdoing.
Found that we didn't do anything wrong. Isn't that great?
Sure.
Sure. Of course they did. But and they probably didn't. But anyway, I wasn't there. But so there's going to be limited participation with AEW in the Tokyo Dome because Dynamite is on Wednesday, and so is the Tokyo Dome show, and AEW's got their own house to keep in order, and that makes perfect sense. So who would be a guy that could be at the Tokyo Dome, but a guy who is coming off of a vacation and isn't part of the week-to-week storylines in the first place? It just seems like the stars align right. But you are correct. There's a lot of time between now and then, especially in American pro wrestling, and a lot of things can happen. But if it goes that direction, I'm in.
The 19th and the 20th of November are going to illuminate a lot of things in terms of the directions that we go. Ever since they really teased Ospreay and Omega, that's where my heart has been on this. Pragmatically, if it's Ospreay and Moxley, fuck it, great, I'm into it. They will build it, and it will be a great match, just like the other one. I don't know. I feel like there's something missing with that build right now that has not. It's a great match, but somewhere along the way, I have to be passionate about the build, and it's not a build that feels Wrestle King to me right now. Does that make any sense?
They still have historic crossover to get us there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's there's plenty of time and plenty of things that need to happen before the dust settles, and 2 months, like I said, to get me excited for these matches. And they've laid out 4 matches out of 12 or 13 that they'll probably have for this card.
Yeah,
plenty of time. But if you're honestly asking me how I feel about it, I'm sorry for the bucket of cold water on that one.
That's all right. I'm into it though. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. Now, you mentioned historic crossover. That's November 20th. We have a show between that show and this one, and so we will do the full-blown preview next week on historic crossover. We'll run down the card. We're going to talk about all of it because we really don't have any more New Japan shows to talk about until historic crossover.
Yeah, we got 90 minutes to talk about a bunch of stuff other than Strong and History Lesson and some of the news that came out of it. But
we'll get to it. World Tag League and Junior Tag League lineups have been announced. That's the one thing that we wanted to make sure we got in because that's the next tour. So we look at the World Tag League, and here they are. You can take a look at it. I'll run it down very quickly. You have Tanahashi and Toru Yano. You have Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi, last year's champions. Alex Coughlin and Gabriel Kidd. Nice little team right there. That'll probably be pretty good. You got Tetsuya Naito and Sonata. You have now Jeff Cobb is going to be with Tamashi, and he's not going to be on this tour. So Okan is teaming with Aaron Henare for this one. And you have Aussie Open. You have Mikey Nichols and Shane Haste. So TMDK going to be there. I like this one. Lance Archer and Minoru Suzuki as a team. Haven't seen a lot of Suzuki. He's been touring North America. It'll be good to see him again. Bad Luck Fale and Chase Owens, classic team there. And then Evil and Yujiro Takahashi. There are a couple things that leap off the page at me on this one, Jeremy, and that is that I have found Tetsuya Naito's the path to the Tokyo Dome. Here's what I'm thinking on this one. Obviously, FTR is going to planning on facing the winner of this tournament in the at Wrestle Kingdom. Mm-hmm. The contending teams seem to be Aussie Open, who just had a title shot and are still a very young tag team and don't need to win it this year. Goto and Yoshihashi, always a contender, but they won last year. I don't know if they do it 2 years in a row. Archer and Suzuki, no doubt that they're going to win a lot of matches out of that. But again, I don't know if they win the whole thing. Naito and Sonata make a lot of sense because it gets Naito and gets those two guys to the Tokyo Dome. And other than that, if they don't win this thing, what are they going to do? Put them in the Rambo? Put them in an 8-man tag in the middle of the match? I just don't see that. Naito is one of their guys that they always put in something meaningful. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the way to do it. For me, anyway, my odds-on favorite as I smack my microphone is Naito and Sonata. That's my prediction anyway, going into this with Goto and Yoshihashi, Aussie Open, and Suzuki and Archer being involved pretty darn late in the standings and probably coming down to the final night, as Geto loves to do to us.
I 100% agree with you. I think that Naito is a dream opponent for FTR, and I think that would probably be a great matchup for them to have. I will tell you this, that December 5th match between Mark Davis and Kyle Fletcher and Great O'Con and Aaron Hanare has me very interested.
Yeah.
That'll be a match that, frankly, if they were smart, Aussie Open would win because they are the established tag team of United Empire, and it would also make them look very strong, challenging the winners of the World Tag League after Wrestle Kingdom, if it is not them. I do not believe it is them. I do not believe it is their time. But I do believe that in the next 12 months, those two individuals will be the IWGP Tag Team Champions.
I think that's very possible. So the other tournament that's coming up, they're going to run at the same time, is the Junior Tag League. And I guess the way that they're going to do it is mostly alternating nights. One night's going to be heavyweight tag team, another night's going to be junior tag, with a couple of shows that are all the whole thing. There's going to be 5 of each in there, a couple of shows like that, but mostly alternating. Junior Tag League, we have Ryusuke Taguchi and Clark Connors, Kushida and Kevin Knight, which was a bit of a surprise. Kushida finally coming back after having that hand, foot, and mouth disease. He's finally clearing up there. Tiger Mask and Robbie Eagles, Yo and Leo Rush, an intriguing team there. And the team that I'm really looking forward to seeing, Alex Zane and El Lindemann. Lindemann, of course, part of GLEAT. I'm kind of fired up about that team. Lindemann's fabulous, and Zane's very good. Bushi and Teton.
Candidate.
Bushi and Teton, the champions, TJP and Francesco Akira. And we have Yoshinobu Kanemaru and Doki from the Suzuki-gun faction. Ace Austin and Chris Bay, which is not a team I would have thought of. But now that you mention it, okay, that'll probably be pretty good to watch. Sho and Dick Togo. So, I mean, right now, I think Bushi and Teton might be the ones that are the most likely winner. I don't see TJP and Akira winning just because, what's the point of this if you have the champions win? Although I guess you ought to do it every once in a while just to show it might happen. Tiger Mask and Robbie, I can see Eagles and Mask having a run, but not quite getting there. Ace Austin and Chris Bay, maybe. How do you see this going?
I think there are 2 very interesting matches on the final night of play that give you a kind of a giveaway on this, and that is Yo and Leo Rush versus Bushi and Teton. And then TJP and Francisco Akira against Bullet Club's Ace Austin and Chris Bay are both on the final night.
Wow, all
so
right.
You can nail down those 4 in the final.
Being in contention.
You can nail those 4 down. And so if you were to look at it, and what do you think? Do you think that the winner will face TJP and Akira in the finals and then challenge them, or face another team and then get the right to face them?
Yeah, I mean, I could see TJP and Akira going to the finals and losing.
Yes.
To set up a Tokyo Dome match.
It is a familiar formula.
Yeah, they could do that. They could definitely do that. I mean, and I don't think anyone would blink an eye because TJP and Akira might be the best team on this list. I mean, it's not a thing where
I would say Yo and Leo Rush will be challenging TJP and Francisco Akira at Wrestle Kingdom.
You're going to predict Yo and Leo? Okay, all right.
I think so. I think that they're probably going to put Leo Rush in a prominent place on Wrestle Kingdom.
Good luck to them. Hopefully it works out okay. Hopefully it works out okay.
The bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out.
Look, we've talked about it before. Leo Rush is an extraordinarily talented guy who tends to leave companies before it's expected. That's all I'm saying. There's a history. There's a history there.
At the same time, if they put him in a position where he looks to be a champion immediately out of his first tournament within the company, that would reinforce what he always says about himself and potentially lead him to want to stick around for a little bit longer, given that his self-proclaimed feelings of greatness have been reinforced.
He is the president, vice president, and treasurer of his own fan club. There's a little question about that. And a member. He's got number 1 on his card. That's his membership number 1. So with that, just ask it. So after that, what else do we have here? Tamashi is debuting in Christchurch, New Zealand on the 11th. This is, of course, the new branch of similar to the NJPW Strong. It's going to be with a lot of the Fale Dojo guys out there in New Zealand, Australia, other parts of Oceania. the early shows, they're not scheduled at this point to be on NJPW Strong. Maybe we'll get to see them down the road. But Jeff Cobb, Kenta, Taiji Ishimori, and Bad Luck Fale, of course, are penciled in for what could be a very interesting project out there. The beginning of Tamashi in Christchurch, New Zealand on the 11th.
Not something that we're going to be able to see right away, nor does it strike me as something that they're really encouraging us to make sure we go out of our way to see. So, I mean, if you're a completist, then I think that they will make it available at some point. But it is not the show that they are urgently encouraging us to look forward to next. Not with some of the other things on the horizon.
It's a pretty crowded calendar right now, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
how many different directions do you want people to look? And I think this is one of these things where maybe they'll just do a tour. Let's get their toe in the water. Let's get things moving a little bit. And then they could probably bring it into the fold of NJPW world and then the overall canon down the road, maybe a tour or two later. It makes sense. Let's, just kind of get a few shows under our belt and then maybe open it up to a wider audience, especially during Wrestle Kingdom time, and tag team tournament time, and historic crossover time. It's like you could get lost in in all of that very easily. With that in mind, speaking of another direction to look at, NJPW Strong. What else is going on with that?
We have 2 weeks to talk about because we had a lot to talk about last week. So I'm going to just blow through these results because they're not amazing matches, but, for the sake of completion and, us being a New Japan show, it is incumbent on me to tell you that I watched these shows and tell you what happened. So in the first match from the 29th of October, we had Kevin Knight. He of the Junior Tag League with Kushida lost against Ari Daivari. Him of the Trustbusters in AEW.
Yeah, of course.
8 minutes, roll up. Kevin Knight got tricked and screwed for the win. Opening match, exactly what you thought it was.
Nothing worse than getting tricked and screwed.
Hey, man, when you're a Trustbuster, you lose trust real quick. So, Blake Christian and Mascara Dorado lost to Alex Zane and Mystico to a Spanish Fly in 10 minutes. Alex Zane, it's a great match. These guys, it was the GCW match of the show. I call this every so often. It's just a lot of flippy shit, a lot of moves, a lot of high paced stuff. If that's your jam, go for it. It's not mine, but there are people that love Alex Zane, yourself included, and I think it's just okay. The talk about gimmick amuses me. The talk about gimmick definitely amuses me. And then we got to Tomohiro Ishii and Tom Lawler. I mentioned last week that Tom Lawler had an impressive losing streak of matches. And this is one of the matches that I included in there in that, oh my goodness, Tom Lawler got his ass kicked by Tomohiro Ishii. There's really no other way to put it. They had a great match. Tom Lawler did everything that he could to have a Tomohiro Ishii match. Tom Lawler is better than anyone really gives him credit for. He is really that good. And I enjoy it when I get to watch his matches. And so then we went on to November 5th, which was the New Japan Showdown. This one opened with Rocky Romero versus Christopher Daniels. And so when I tell you that this was a better opening match than Aria Daivari and Kevin Knight, please believe me when I tell you that it was. It was a fantastic match in which these two that I also mentioned I saw on the same card 20 years ago at a UPW show, and they somewhat mentioned this history during the match. These guys are veterans. They're freaking great. I don't know what I need to tell you to say, like, Christopher Daniels and Rocky Romero can do this match in their sleep, and they probably did. And it wasn't a 4-star match, but my God, they can make a 3-star, 3.5-star match amazing. And it was great. I had a great time. We then had a number one contenders match. It was a four-way tag match. So follow me here. We got Jor-El Nelson and Royce Isaac of the West Coast Wrecking Crew. We had Barrett Brown and Mysterioso, the Stray Dog Army. DKC and Kevin Knight of LA Dojo, and Bad Dude Tito and Shane Haste of TMDK. And so they all went after each other in this match. It was a great match. I was not expecting Barrett Brown and Mysterioso to win this match, but I should have when Bateman was the guest commentator for this entire episode until the end of this match, in which they won the match and then are going to go on and face the Motor City Machine Guns for the New Japan Strong tag titles. And then finally, we got to the main event match. Do you know what the main event match for the show was?
Oh, I did when we started the show, but now we've talked about so many matches that I have blanked it. I'm sorry. What was the main event?
Hiroshi Tanahashi versus Gabriel Kidd.
Right, yes. Okay.
And my goodness, my goodness, the aura of Hiroshi Tanahashi in a building like that with his graphics and his music, he looks like such a bigger star than everybody else on that thing. And it is not even close. And, you know, he's looking a little more Greg the Hammer Valentine than he is Hiroshi Tanahashi these days. But it really doesn't matter. He's just like the aura is there and the crowd loves him. This was a confidence building match for Gabriel Kidd in a lot of ways. So as you remember, Gabriel Kidd had a number of issues dating back to some mental health and had to take some time away. And so this whole match was basically like, you can get in the ring with me, Hiroshi Tanahashi, and let's see if you can hang. And so Gabriel Kidd naturally played the heel, mocked the guitar, did all the moves, thought he had Hiroshi. The whole story, everything that this match you've seen it 100 times, but match was over. Tanahashi won with a high fly flow. It was a Hiroshi Tanahashi match on New Japan Strong, and I love New Japan Strong, but you don't get Hiroshi Tanahashi matches on New Japan Strong. So this was a treat. It was a lot of fun, and then afterwards, Gabriel Kidd and Tanahashi showed respect towards each other, did the whole deal, just. It was a feel-good match, and it's nice to see Gabriel Kidd have his confidence back. It's nice to see that New Japan trusted him enough to put him in the ring with Hiroshi Tanahashi and show their faith in him. And so there's a lot of takeaways from that go far beyond what you saw in the ring in terms of the impact that match had.
I'm looking forward to the match. I know they're not going to score a ton of points in the tag league, but to see Gabriel Kidd and Coughlin in there together, I think could provide a lot of really good action, and might be something that helps their career down the line. Just to have good outings. We know they're not going to win the tournament, but I'm rooting for those two to have a good tour and get their careers on track, because I think those are two really talented guys.
There was an interesting promo right before from Gabriel Kidd, and he said that Tanahashi told him that there's a 3 Musketeers of every generation. And so in this generation, it was Gabriel Kidd, it was Clark Connors, and it was Alex Coughlin. And then he said, of that, there's an ace of the 3. And then he's like, I'm that ace. So that'll be a really interesting thing in terms of who's the one to stand out, and if that kind of mentality starts playing it more between those 3. Because there was definitely like a competition and an ego thing about it that I took notice of, and I think it's really interesting. So,
and there are 3. Some of the things he's talking about very briefly, like Shinya Hashimoto, Masahiro Chono, Kaiji Muto, and then those 3, and then you got to Nakamura, Tanahashi, Shibata, and then moving forward, we could be looking at those 3, and on the native Japanese side, we could be looking at a thing where it's Umino, Narita, and Yota Tsuji, perhaps something coming up. So something to look out for there. But he makes a good point. They do come in 3s, like many other things in life. So there you have it.
So do you have a history lesson for us today?
I do a little bit. And what we were talking about, we've been going back over Inoki. And in future weeks, we're going to talk more about the tag team tournaments and the history of those as well, because those have a long history in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We mentioned the U.S. title, about how they have worked to establish that as a true title. Establishing a title is one thing. Establishing an entire new promotion is another one. And that was the task that Antonio Inoki was faced with as he left JWA. A lot of things were changing, of course. It wasn't just a matter of leaving and starting up a new company, because he did all that, combined with the idea of Now there's another new company that's also going on at the same time because the other big star of the JWA, Giant Baba, Shohei Baba, also left and formed All Japan Pro Wrestling. So, of course, JWA, the dominant company, there were other companies. There were other promotions in Japan. We're going to mention one of them in a bit. But the JWA was the number one. It was dominant. It had 2 national television shows. Now, Inoki managed to grab one. Again, that network has changed names over the years a couple of times, but it's TV Asahi, which they're still on. And All Japan was on NTV, which was the other show that JWA had. Well, now you have 2 different companies. Fans can be a fan of both, but you want to make sure that you're the number one. So how do you do that? You got to try to get an air of legitimacy right away, correct? I mean, that's the thing. Now, Baba had a connection with the NWA. At the time that this happened, early 1972, New Japan and All Japan both formed. Dory Funk Jr. was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. He began his reign in February 1968. He held the title until May of 1973. So long-term NWA champion. He had a good rapport with Baba. Baba very quickly moved to make All Japan the home of the NWA title in Japan. That being one of the most famous titles in all of wrestling, and certainly at this point, the number one title in professional wrestling goes, Lou Thez is a legend in Japan. So many NWA champions were over in Japan. So all of a sudden, Inoki's standing around thinking, oh, well, he looks legitimate right off the bat. He's got the NWA World Champion coming in and he has the Funks who are already over there, and got to come up with something. Well, the WWF couldn't have been it right away, even though he had a pretty good relationship with a lot of those guys. The WWF had actually rejoined the NWA in 1971. They broke away and gave the belt because they didn't want Buddy Rogers to lose back to Lou Thez. Buddy Rogers was a bigger draw in New York. So they left, formed the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, and put the title on Buddy, and then it went to Bruno Sammartino, and history, right? In 1971, they actually quietly rejoined the NWA. Vince McMahon Sr. never really let go of all those contacts, and so it became the WWF heavyweight title instead of the World Heavyweight title. So that one wasn't available. Well, there was the AWA, but they worked a lot with the IWE, which was the other big promotion in Japan. Still a pretty healthy promotion, definitely number 2 to JWA. So, man, what do you do? Where do you get this legitimacy? It's difficult to just start up a new company and just say, hey, here's a champion. And, that there was another company. It was called the NWF, National Wrestling Federation. Pedro Martinez was the promoter. It was based out of Buffalo, New York. And it was in a bit of dire straits. It was based in Buffalo. They shot their TV in Cleveland, Ohio, ran shows around that Great Lakes area in the Northeast, but not quite all the way in the Northeast where the WWF was, right? So it was in a little bit of a struggle. The champion at the time was Johnny Powers. Other champions have been guys like Johnny Valentine, legit title holders up there. Dusty Rhodes had wrestled for the NWF for a little bit. This is early in his career, but still. And he just thought, okay, that might be the solution to my problem. So when the NWF was in bad shape and Johnny Powers was the champion, Powers had done tours in Japan before. He had even worked with that company, Tokyo Pro Wrestling. We remember when Inoki first got back from his excursion, he didn't go right back to JWA. He tried this little side, this little upstart company that didn't quite make it. Johnny Powers was one of the foreigners they brought in for that. So he had a connection. So basically, he made a deal with Powers as that promotion was fading and to win the NWF title. And he won it on December 10th, 1973. So they went through 1972, went through a lot of 1973 with this chase. And then finally, Inoki won the NWF title, and there was a World Heavyweight Championship, so to speak, in the New Japan fold. So while IWE had the AWA champion, which is Nick Bockwinkel, Vern Gagne, the NWA champion was with All Japan, and that was the Dory Funk, very briefly Harley Race, and then Jack Briscoe. He had the NWF title. That title was the world title in New Japan for many, many years. Again, the IWGP belt didn't come up until like the mid 1980s. So the NWF belt was kind of the major singles title that Inoki absolutely dominated. And again, this was to try to establish the company, establish some credibility, and of course, establish Inoki as the number one guy. It helps when you're the booker, but to be fair, Inoki was the biggest star in the company. And if you go back and you watch tape and you watch some of the stuff that's on NJPW World or on YouTube, you will see that there was something special about Antonio Inoki. He had a connection with the audience. He had a charisma, and he was good. He was not. It was legit. This guy was the number one star. But he dominated this NWF title, Jeremy. Let me explain how much he dominated this thing. So I mentioned December 1973. He's a new world champion now. He's got this belt. They did an angle where he was this in 1975. He refused to defend it against Tiger Jeet Singh, who was his top heel, and was basically playing he was basically playing the Sheik. He was an Indian character, but he basically did the Sheik shtick. The original Sheik I'm talking about, where it was just no regard for rules, running through the crowd, assaulting people with objects. He was just a maniac. So he refused to defend it against Tiger Jeet Singh. So they stripped him of the title. He didn't lose it. He was stripped of it. So, and then of course he ended up getting it back from Tiger Jeet Singh, held it for years, like for another 1,800 days until 1980, where he had a no contest with Stan Hansen and the title was held up. And he beat Stan Hansen for it. So we're talking about he basically held this title from 1973 until about 1983. It was really like the 10 years, and the only time Inoki didn't hold this title was when it was held up a little bit there. So that was one of his big efforts to try to get a little legitimacy. Now, he also focused on martial arts with the idea of that was something that Baba and all of Japan was very traditional professional wrestling. Very traditional professional wrestling. A good version of it, but very traditional. He wanted to focus a little bit more on martial arts because he had practiced it before. And the idea was going to be to get wrestlers over, professional wrestlers over as the best fighters on earth. And they were going to do this by having worked matches that were supposed to look like real matches and real fights.
Oh, here we go on that stuff.
Yes. So
here we go.
He would book people. He would book people from Europe and Asia, and he would book them to lose. And so I mentioned before, sometimes it worked well, sometimes it didn't. Roland Bach and Karam Pawan are two guys. If you want to look up some YouTubes and see some clusterfucks, there you go. And they were the matches where they didn't quite go as they were supposed to go as far as the work part goes. Not everybody gets the memo, Jeremy. The most famous instance of this was against Muhammad Ali. What could make you a bigger star than being in the ring with the most famous human being on earth? Fair enough, right? So most people have heard this story, but if you haven't, and if you haven't heard the leagues, he managed to make a deal with Muhammad Ali to have a fight, a worked fight that Inoki would win, but Ali would lose in a way that protected Ali. There have been different versions of what that finish was supposed to be, but a lot of it involved like Ali being surprised or some sort of interference, and it would be a way for Ali to say that he didn't actually lose, but Inoki was going to come out on top. So they get this whole thing together. Big event in Japan, obviously. Muhammad Ali is as big a star there as he is anywhere else. One of the most famous human beings on earth, probably the most famous. Closed circuit locations around the world putting this fight on. They came up with a pretty big production for this. So if you went to the closed circuit locations to watch, you would get two things. You would get the Ali Inoki fight from Japan. You would also get another boxer versus wrestler match, which is Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne Bleeder, a famous heavyweight boxer. The Bayonne Bleeder, that was his name, because he would hit him with a roll-up newspaper and he would bleed in a fight. He was the Manny Fernandez of boxing. Just would bleed at any point. And against Andre the Giant. And that would be at Shea Stadium. So if you think this is the mid-1970s and you're going to go there and you're going to get film from Shea Stadium in New York, then you're going to see this match live from Tokyo. It was a heck of a production. It would be a tricky one now, let alone in the mid-70s. Around the country, they sold tickets to this thing. A lot of the territories in the United States had cards where you would see a few of the matches from your local territory, and then they would show the Andre and Inoki fights on the big screen on closed circuit. So you would get a little bit of both. And I brought up a couple of these, and I thought some of the cards were interesting. For instance, in Shea Stadium, that card, you would see the Inoki Ali fight. You would also see Ivan Putski beating Baron Mikhail Cicluna, which was a match to be endured. But you would also see Kevin Sullivan, early Kevin Sullivan, go to a time limit draw with Jose Gonzalez, who's the piece of garbage that murdered Bruiser Brody in a locker room in Puerto Rico. So there's some historic stuff here. Chief J. Strongbow and Billy White Wolf, would become Sheik Adnan Al-Kaisi in the AWA, the manager, defeated the Executioners. Defeated the Executioners by DQ in a tag team title match. You know who the Executioners were?
Were they Demolition?
No, they weren't. Darn. But one of them was Killer Kowalski under a mask. The other was John Minton under a mask, who went on to be Big John Studd. So
that's a big couple of guys.
Big couple of guys. Now they would have the Andre the Giant Chuck Wepner match. He defeated Chuck by count out after hitting him with a headbutt. Wepner tumbled out of the ring, and after a little bit over a minute of the third round, that's how that one ended. Andre got the win, and then Bruno Sammartino defeated Stan Hansen by countout for the World Heavyweight title in the main event there at Shea Stadium. Drew 33,000 people. So big card.
Sammartino, baby.
Big draw. In the Cow Palace in San Francisco, you could watch Pat Patterson defeat the Great Fuji. And Don Morocco and Masa Saito against Pedro Morales and Tony Gurria. That was the Cow Palace card. If you went to Chicago, you could see Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher defeat Blackjack Lanza and Bobby Duncombe, and Vern Gagne go to a time limit draw with Nick Bockwinkel for the AWA title. Now, all these are part of these little coordination. Yeah, I mean, a lot of work went into all this stuff. So,
yeah.
Problem was, of course, Muhammad Ali balked at the idea of doing the job.
Right.
And so at the last second, they just decided to have a match, and they came up with this convoluted set of rules to protect everyone involved in this. And what it ended up being was, because it was a boxer versus wrestler match, Inoki thought, well, I'm insane to try to strike with this guy, and he's right. So for 15 rounds, 15 agonizing, mind-numbingly boring rounds, Inoki pretty much laid on his back and kicked at Ali's legs, because it was the only thing he could do to make sure that he didn't get punched in the friggin' head. And it was not exciting. It was uninteresting. And while Ali's legs were battered to the point he did have to go to the hospital, the fight was declared a draw. And let's just hope that your local matches were more exciting than that one was, because that one was it ended up being a stinker.
I remember when Meltzer talks about that match, he says that Ali's legs were never the same.
Yeah, and that's true. He did take a beating in that one, just because it was about the only offense that Inoki could safely do against him. So anyway, that one didn't turn out as well as he was hoping right there. But he also put himself
not a dream match, but a nightmare.
No, but Inoki continued to establish himself. He won 6 of the first 8 tournaments that they had, the precursors to the G1, the World League, the MSG League. It changed names, but it was there. He won 6 of the first 8 and 10 overall. So there was very little doubt who the top star was, even if all of his plans didn't work out perfectly. So
wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yes. In the late 70s, of course, the NWF title stayed in Japan. That promotion, the NWF, folded up in the United States, and that was the only place that title existed, was in Japan. In the late 70s, of course, WWF left the NWA again, and that's when Inoki started working a lot with the WWF and then WWF, as they dropped the wide out of Worldwide Wrestling Federation. So once they left the NWA, then they were free to work with them again. You know, the one person that he never did work with, though, Jeremy, was Bruno Sammartino. Sammartino had a long-standing relationship with Baba, going back to the JWA days. He would be brought in as a foreigner to wrestle Baba, to wrestle the various native stars there in JWA. And he always liked Baba and stayed loyal to him. And oddly enough, as Baba was working with the NWA and Inoki was working with the WWF, Bruno would go over and work for Baba and would refuse to work for New Japan. Nothing personal against Inoki, but he was loyal to Baba. End of story. That was all there was to it. So he got all the WWF guys except the biggest one, so, but this all culminated in very late 70s. 1979, Antonio Inoki had his run with the WWF title very briefly. It was not acknowledged in the United States. We'll get to that. He won the title from Backlund. So it was not unusual back then for guys to go to Japan, drop the title, champions to drop the title, have a big Japanese star. Baba did this with the NWA title a couple of times. Go through a tour, and then the last night of the tour, they would lose it back to the American, who would then take the title back to the United States. People in the United States, none the wiser, right? It might be mentioned on the shows that but they never really saw Baba as the champion or anything like that. They were going to do that with Inoki and Backlund. So what they did was this. He won the title in Tokushima on November 30th, 1979, beat Bob Backlund. He's the WWF champion. They had a rematch later on in that tour. That ended in a no contest due to interference from Tiger Jeet Singh. So I mentioned that Tiger Jeet Singh played that maniac character. Well, here he just ran into the ring and caused so much havoc that they threw the entire match out. Well, being the upstanding citizen model hero that Inoki is, he said, this is not how I wanted to defend this title. I vacate this championship. I didn't beat Backlund. Yes, this nut came in and interfered and everything, but I didn't win the match. Therefore, I shouldn't be called the champion. That was the out, so that they could get the title back off of Inoki without Inoki losing it, because Inoki did not want to lose, and really ever, and certainly not in Japan, certainly not in a big match like that to Backlund. So that was how they sold it. What was interesting is Backlund went back to New York, and technically this, to show you just how seriously everybody took everything. You would think no internet. How many people were calling people in Japan, right? They could just have Bob come back with the belt and say, hey, he never lost it, right? Instead, what they did was this. They kind of did that, but they kind of didn't. December 17th at Madison Square Garden, Backlund wrestled Bobby Duncombe in a Texas death match. Okay? Backlund actually came to the ring without the belt. Now, they didn't say anything to the crowd that the title was held up or that the title was vacant. They didn't say that. But Backlund came to the ring with no title around his waist. He was introduced as Bob Backlund, not WWF champion Bob Backlund. How many people really noticed that during the whole thing, right? He wrestled Bobby Duncombe, beat Bobby Duncombe, and then after the match, he was given the WWF championship belt and introduced as WWF champion Bob Backlund. And so, to show you how seriously they took it, while they didn't announce it to the crowd, he did not come out with the belt when he wasn't the champion, when it was technically vacated, and then he was given it afterwards, and then he could have it. Right, then he could have the belt around his waist, but not before the match. That's how seriously.
Is that like a phantom title change?
A little bit, because they never acknowledged it in the United States until very, very recently, when I think Inoki went into the WWF Hall of Fame.
Right,
and Michael Cole just mentioned it and said that he was the first Japanese person to win the WWF title, and they even acknowledged that the title reign wasn't mentioned back.
It was under controversial circumstances.
Right. So yeah, and so it took decades, but Inoki is actually now kind of considered a former WWF champion. So that closed out the 70s. He still had that NWF belt. WWF also created a World Martial Arts title that they presented to Inoki at Madison Square Garden once, and he would walk around with that, and he would kind of use that during some of these wrestler versus kickboxer, wrestler versus sambo fighter matches that I mentioned, some of those early mixed martial arts matches that were actually works, but he would use that that martial arts title. But after that, he kept the NWF title around, and he held it all the way until he relinquished and retired the belt going into the 1983 International Wrestling Grand Prix tournament, IWGP tournament. And that was when Hulk Hogan won by beating Inoki in the finals. And back then, the IWGP champion was presented with a belt, but it was more like a trophy in those days. It was not a title that was defended year round. You would just kind of receive the belt for winning the IWGP title. And that was kind of your trophy, so to speak. But it wasn't like a defended title the rest of the year. The next year, somebody else would get another one, until they just decided, well, we need a singles title again. And the winner of the 1987, I believe, IWGP tournament became the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, the belt that went all the way until it was combined with the Intercontinental title, and we got that. So that was kind of how Antonio Inoki establishes legitimacy, by fighting the most famous man in the world, by doing those mixed martial arts matches, and also by taking a very obscure local title in Buffalo and Cleveland, Ohio, and turning it into a world championship that he dominated for 10 years. And after that, didn't need a whole lot else. Inoki was a legend by then, and he could go on into the 1980s as one of the biggest stars on earth.
One of these days you're going to catch me off guard, and you're going to be like, and that kid is How I Met Your Mother.
So here's the one last thing. We're running out of time. One last odd fact about that title. It was revived in 2002, the NWF title. It was an angle. Kazuyuki Fujita held a tournament to crown a new NWF champ to rival the IWGP title. And on January 4th, 2003, Toshihiro Takayama won it. He was a big MMA guy in the early days there. Takayama was, and a pro wrestler. Won it on January 4th, 2003. This is the day before those shows were called Wrestle Kingdom. And he lost it a year later to IWGP champion Shinsuke Nakamura to combine the two titles. And Nakamura retired the NWF belt, said, well, the IWGP title is the only one that matters anyway. And he retired it for good. That was the last the NWF has been heard from.
So much history to unpack sometimes with you. I don't know. Like, you went 20 minutes and it doesn't feel like 20 minutes, but
I'm glad it doesn't feel
like there's so much to talk about. There's so much to unpack. Like, there's
a lot to edit too. I had to chop a lot out of that, but in future weeks we're going to go across like things like the tag team.
We had to skip it last week, so I understood ahead of time this was going to maybe go a little bit. So thanks everybody, because you got smarter. Don't forget that you got smarter by listening to what we had to the Inoki history, because there are a lot of places you can find this, but we're glad you're taking time to listen to us.
And then again, I do want to give very quick credit to Dave Meltzer's story in The Observer after Inoki's death. There's a little bit of Wikipedia in there. There's some WrestlingData.com is where I got some of those match results. And Chris Charlton's book, Lion's Pride, I got some information off of that too. So quick bibliography there on some of that research.
We know some smart people. It's pretty nice.
All right. So, Jeremy, with that in mind, you wanted to hit your socials very quickly. I know they've been on the bottom of the screen off and on a little bit.
You can find me at the Fight Game Media Facebook group, Jeremy Finestone. You can also find me at Twitter at Jer Finestone until Twitter burns down. So
could be any minute now.
That would be nice.
At Stephen Conway 88 is my Twitter, ringsidereplay.com, my history website. And of course, check out Fight Game Media, both the Patreon, the YouTube feed, the podcast feed, so much great information there, and terrific shows with some great hosts. So we hope you do. And we will be looking at historic crossover next week. Anything else you want to add, Jeremy, before we sign off?
No, just thanks for watching, everybody. Really happy. We're going to do the show either way, but we're really glad you're here.
Exactly. We're thrilled somebody's paying attention. No, we're very grateful for the folks who watch the show. We're very interested in your feedback. Do not hesitate to let us know what you think. So with that in mind, for Jeremy Finestone, I'm Stephen Conway. Thanks for watching Speaking of Strong Style. We'll catch you very soon.